Okay, hello everyone, welcome back to the Coding Chamber. Today we're going to talk about constants and lists, and you may not know what those things are. So first, let's go create a new Python file, get it up. Let's first talk about constants so I can enter into the discussion about lists. A constant is pretty much a variable that you can never change. So, for example, say we have some constant, and we're going to make it equal that string. If that was our constant, we would never change that throughout the program. It's useful when you're, say, doing games and you want to have, the player's name be constant, or something like that, or the user's IP address, or something along those lines. In other languages, you have a way to indicate to the environment when a constant is happening, like when you're making a constant. In Python, you have no such thing. So you just gotta kind of remember, like you could start your variables like constant, and then maybe go const player, right? So const player health, right? And that would just indicate to you that's a constant. I should never use it. Change it. In other languages, there is such a way to indicate to the environment that you're never going to change the variable. You're making it a constant. Now, onto lists. So, I'm going to use the example of a bunch of workers in a store. So, say I'm the store owner and I'm very technically savvy, and I want to create a little program that gives me the name of my employees and some other useful information, maybe. But let's just say names for now. We would do it by, say we kind of don't know what a list is, so say we're going to create, say we have 60 employees, and we're going to go through and create all 60 variables, give them each a string value, and that's going to be our employees, and those are going to be our names. Say we can have worker 1 name, worker 2 name, and then we're going to create 60 of those. But we don't have to do that because that's inefficient. It's going to take a lot of memory. We can instead just create a list. So we could just make a list like worker name. So you just start it like a normal variable in Python. You just give it a name. You make an equal sign, and you put a bracket, or you put 2 brackets. Python will automatically complete. And then you can just put stuff in here. So I could put, say, Joe, and say my next worker is Maurice. That's Marisa, but whatever, right? And so I could just keep doing that. And so to actually put stuff in lists, you need to do a couple things. First, you start with a bracket, and then you can put the first thing in, and then you gotta, anytime you put something in a list, and then you want to put another thing, you have to put a little colon, and then put the next thing. And then put another colon and put the next thing. And I can also throw, variable like numbers in there, and maybe characters, like, I can throw a lot of things in there, right? So I can just throw stuff in there. Okay, so the next data type we're going to talk about is like a list. It's called a tuple. And tuples are pretty much unmutable lists. It's probably a thing you don't know. Pretty much, that's a list where you can't change anything. So with our worker example, we could take worker, and I'm actually going to talk about indexing. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. So, say we have our first index, Joe, right? So now, say I want to get the value from worker. How would I do that? Well, I would go down here, and I'd say worker, and then I'd put the bracket, and then I'd put the number that corresponds to the thing. So, this is going to be more easily demonstrated in the magic of Paint. So say we have our list. Let's imagine it like a number line, and we have a bunch of stuff on our list, right? So we have, say, some circles and some squares. You can just imagine these as like letters and strings and stuff, right? So if I wanted to grab the circle, I would have to go say our list is called objects or shapes or something like that, and then I want to get this circle. And my circle's in the first place, so you say like maybe something like shapes, 1. And if I did that, this right here, this would give us shapes, right? We would think that, but actually that's false, right? So maybe if I did this shapes 1, it would give us this, but actually shapes 1, it would give you a square. And you're like, what? But that's in the second place. Yes, it is. Very aptly noted. But that's not how programs work. With lists, we start counting at 0. So the circle would be shapes 0. The first one, so this is the first index, 2, 3, 4, etiquette. This is actually the first thing, but we start counting at 1 when indexing. And indexing is simply the way you grab stuff, right? So right, what I'm doing right here, what this is known as indexing. So it's just simply the way you grab values from a list, right? So it's shapes 1. I've just indexed, object from it. That's the way. This is what I'm doing right there is the way you index. It's just one of the ways you can get data from a list. So knowing this, say we want to get Joe. You put Joe 0, and let's say we want to print Joe 0. So we're going to print it. Then we're going to just save this. We're going to save it in our Python programs. Just say as lists. Oh, sorry, I realize you can't see this. Yeah, so we save lists, and then we're going to run this. We're actually not going to do that. We're going to press F5 and run it, and it's not going to work because. And now we're going to run it. It's coming out Joe and magical. So then we can, do more stuff. We can do worker 1. Yes, save it. And Marisa. And then what if we do worker 2? That's a good question. It screams at us. Pretty much we're trying to index. We're trying to get something from the list that doesn't actually exist. I'm wondering if this works. This should. Let's plug in -1. What? -1 gives us Marisa. Well, why is that? Well, let's see what happens if we add something else in, like random words, and then we run it. And so this is what -1 does, at least in Python. -1 in Python gives us the last value in that list. So in this case, it would be right? So that's what -1 is. It's really useful if you want to get like there's lots of cases where you want to get the last thing. So now that we're done with our lists, if you have any questions about lists, ask them in the comments. We're going to progress on to tuples. And tuples are like constants except for lists. So they're constant lists. So say, before we do that, actually, one more thing. You can change the values within something. So say we have worker, and it equals, let's just say Joe. Now say, I don't, later in the program I say, no, I don't want that value in there anymore. I can say worker 0 equals this new value instead, which looks pretty much the same. And then that's print worker 0. I'm just going to prove this to you, because output's always good. Let's actually make this something recognizable, like nub. That's our worker's name. Look, lo and behold, we have changed the value of a list. So that's how you change values of lists. You just you index it and then you reassign the value. So tuples are constant lists. So how do you make them? So say we have worker. Instead of doing the brackets, you're instead going to use parentheses. So the first thing we're going to do is just throw list things in there like any other list. So Joe, say Bob, maybe there's a number in there. Like, that's not a number. Like 23, something like that, right? And then, I don't want, I don't want Joe in there anymore. Let's make it, I fired Joe, right? And now I'm gonna make a Marisa, and we run this, and it screams at us. It says tuple object does not assign support item assignment. And you're like, what is an object? You type error and it's screaming at you, and you're confused. Pretty much what that's saying is tuples. You can't change them around like you can lists. Once you set them up, they're set in stone. But you can, just print out stuff, right? So, nope, not there. So that's print worker 0 and Joe. So indexing still works with tuples. You just can't change them. So they're like lists except constants. So in the next tutorial, we're going to be talking about loops, and then finally we're going to return to functions. Then we're going to cut some other stuff like dictionaries and other things like that. And then we're going to tackle the big bad wolf object-oriented programming. And then I think I'm going to progress more heavily into Java. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, leave them in the comments. That's where they're there. If you like the video, like it. If you want to subscribe, subscribe. So thanks. Goodbye.